Okay, Shavua Tov. So we're doing Perek Mem Zayin, Psalm 47 this week. I hope everybody's got. There's plenty of copies. I made copies and the office made copies, so we've got tons. So this poem, I hope, looks familiar to you, because this is the poem that we recite 7 times before we blow shofar on Rosh Hashanah morning. And so, yeah, you hope that after reciting it 7 times, it makes some impact. But you know what? It's very sad that, sometimes I talk to people about the poem, and people I expected would understand, and they say, I was just concentrating on blowing shofar. We recite a lot of things as if we were reading the phone book rather than concentrating on it. So I hope this morning we'll get some insight into this poem. How do I say this? This is not one of my favorite poems. My favorite poems, like 27, which we did before, and like 32, which we're going to do 2 weeks from today, because next week is Erev Rosh Hashanah. We're not going to have a class, but 2 weeks from today, during the Sunday of Aseret Mei Tshuva, we're going to do Lamed Bet, which is the psalm the Vilna Gaon said we're supposed to recite on Yom Kippur. Those poems I love, because in those poems, David HaMelech is struggling with internal problems, and he's like opening up, his heart and mind to us, and you really feel like you're almost eavesdropping on his conscience in those poems. I just love that. This poem is one of the many poems in Tehillim, which is, hip, hip, hooray, isn't it great? And, okay, there's nothing wrong. And I'm sure back in the Beit HaMikdash, they had beautiful tunes for this, because it's Lamanatseach Livnei Korach Mizmor. It's for the orchestra leader of the children of Korach. Those were Leviim. Okay, Mizmor, it's a song. And then the song has 3 parts to it. There's nothing wrong with having these uplifting poems. I just don't find them as rich as the poems where David HaMelech is sharing his difficulties with us. Okay, it's a personal predilection. If you disagree with me, Gesundheit, you have obviously every right in the world. Before we start the poem, I just want you to notice, okay, so forget about verse Aleph. That's like the superscript. If you look in the Christian translations, they don't even count that as a verse, which is sometimes a problem when you're looking up translations on like secular websites. There's a great Christian website called Bible Gateway. Should I plug a Christian website? But they have about 35 different translations, simultaneous translations of Tanakh. And so it's really cool to look up a pasuk. But quite often a psalm like this, the psukim are off by 1 because they don't count it. It's not part of the poem per se. The poem itself has 3 parts. And so it's 2 through 5. The first part is 4 verses. Then the middle part, Vav Zayin Chet, is 3, and then the final section is 2. 3, 2, 1. And when the poets, this one's not David HaMelech, it's Bnei Korach, the Levium themselves are writing this. When they do 3, 2, 1, it's like blast off, but it's sort of like they're leading up to something. In other words, they're focusing in on an issue. And so we have to see what that issue is, and the issue is twofold, as you'll soon see. So let's take a look at the beginning of the poem. One more thing, just before we start the poem. Notice I underlined the word Elokim in the poem. I highlighted, if you got 6, either you're counting wrong or I underlined incorrectly. It should come up to 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7. So there's 6. There's 7. It's important that there's 7. Okay, it's important that there's 7 because otherwise I don't have anything to say. Okay, there's 7 Elokims, and we say the poem on Rosh Hashanah 7 times. So we're saying Elokim 49 times. What does 49 remind you of? Oh, when we left Egypt, we went down 49 steps of Tumah. And as a therapy for that, right? As a cure for that, we did 49 days until the 50th day we got to Pentateuch. The Greek name for Shavuot is the 50th day, because many things in Judaism, we believe strongly that if you measure things, you measure it by 50 steps. There are 50 steps. Like we say, there are 50 steps of Nevuah or Chachma. But we believe that in this world, no one can get above 49. The 50th step, the perfect step, is only in heaven. So when we get to step 49, and that's what we're doing, when we get to step 49, in our relationship with Elokim, we're now on the threshold of 50, which means we're on the threshold of perfection, heaven, the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the poem, and reciting it 7 times, is bringing us into the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's like a parade, and you get the sense of parade in the poem, as we're going to see. And the parade is bringing us closer and closer to Hashem. That is most obvious. But there's another thing going on in the poem. The name Elokim in Jewish tradition represents, number one, Teva. It's got the same gematria as nature, okay? It also represents Mishpat, Din, justice, law, as opposed, which is like the left hand of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. So in the poem, we're trying to get a Kadosh Baruch Hu alot to go higher, to a higher throne. What is HaKadosh Baruch Hu on the higher throne? Rachamim, which is Yud Ke Vav Ke. So we have in the poem Elokim, we have 7 times, but we've got Yud Ke Vav Ke, I believe 3 times. If my memory, maybe only twice. I guess it's only twice. Yeah, just twice. Okay, but the goal is to get Elokim to morph into Yud Ke Vav Ke. Rosh Hashanah is the Yom Tov of Elokim. What's the Yom Tov of Yud Ke Vav Ke? Yom Kippur. Hashem, Hashem, Kel Rachum V'Chanun. Right? So in other words, we're moving up. Now, I apologize, I don't have a larger picture of this, but maybe we can pass it around if people want to take a look. I'm going to hold it up for my screen, okay? If you look at the picture that was painted by Nachshon for this poem, and you can see the theme is clearly shofarot. I mean, if you can't see now, I'll have it afterwards if people take a look. But shofarot, there's one big shofar in the middle, and around it, a smaller shofarot. Anyone want to guess how many smaller shofarot are around the big shofar? No. No. No, there's 7 Hasidim at the bottom dancing. He does have 7 in it. There are 26 shofarot. Because the blowing of the shofar is raising a Kadosh Baruch Hu from Elokim to 26. What's 26? Yud Ke Vav Ke. 26 is the gematria of the Shem Havaya, the tetragrammaton, right? So it's like he's showing that the purpose of blowing the shofar is to access the Rachamim side of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. That's what we want to do. But of course, he's got the number 7 in there with the 7 dancing Hasidim at the bottom. Okay? Okay, so bearing that now, we have to take a look at the poem itself. But there's a lot going on behind the scenes in this poem. But what's going on in the forefront? It's a march. And what's the march? Kol ha'amim tiku kaf. Tiku'u kaf. What's tiku'u kaf? Clap hands. Kaf is the palm. The palm of your hand is the kaf. So we're making noise with your palm. Okay? So to make noise with your palm means to clap. So all the nations, everybody is recognizing that we have to clap hands. Now, the clap hands here didn't mean applause. Like today, whatever, put your hands together and give a big welcome to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. No, that's not what's going on. That's not what's going on in the poem. Here, it's they're clapping to the music of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's parade. Okay? And it's a special kind of parade, as you're going to see in a second. By the way, the Hasidim say, I forget which Hasidic Rebbe said it, but he said the term kaf is another hint in the poem, because the gematria of kaf is 100. Kaf is 20 and pei is 80. And that's a hint to the 100 kolot that we blow, the 100 sounds that we make on the shofar. So that's a Hasidic shavot. And I apologize, I can't remember which Hasidic Rebbe said it. So he says, all the nations of the world should be clapping in time. Okay? To the music. Hario lelokim b'kol rina. Make joyous noise with a sound of happy singing to Elokim. What are we doing? We are greeting HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In the poem, it's like people are standing around. Everybody in the world is standing around, making noise and music for the entrance of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's like a parade, a special kind of parade, as you're going to see in a second. Ki Hashem Elyon Nora. And here we use the other name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the higher name, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Yud Ke Vav Ke Shem Havaya, is Elyon Nora, is awesomely ascendant, Elyon. Who was the first person, by the way, to refer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu as Elyon? Kel Elyon. It wasn't Avram. Someone said it to Avram. Malki.
When they brought back the captive.
Right. In chapter 14 of Breshit, after that world war, the 4 kings against the 5 kings, he saved Lot. And then Malki Tzedek, the king of Yerushalayim, says, Kel Elyon, God ever ascended. And so we like that name for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's like Avram Avinu borrowed it from this spiritual Gentile and handed it to us. So we continue to call him Elyon, but not just Elyon, Norah. Awesomely ascendant. Ascendant beyond our capability of grasping. It's like we can't comprehend how high HaKadosh Baruch Hu is. Melech Gadol al Kol Haaretz. And we have the word Melech, as you can see, in each part of the poem. Melech, Malkeinu Melech, each part of the poem has the term Melech in it, because that's one of the themes of Rosh Hashanah. Malchiot is HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not Hakel HaKadosh, HaMelech HaKadosh. On Rosh Hashanah, God is the king, but he's the king over the entirety of the universe. And all of the nations are recognizing that. And they're recognizing that not necessarily in a positive, uplifting way. Because what happens in the next verse, so I'm not going to say it's disturbing. I think it's recording either, this is a big machlokah when you get to verse Daled. Are we recording the historical event of the conquest of Eretz Yisrael in the time of Yoshua, when the Jews actually subjugated other peoples? That's what's going on in verse 4. Or is it a reference to Melech HaMashiach? Is this a future event? And of course, many Meforshim say, and I think correctly, Both. It's both a reference back to when the Jews conquered all of those nations in Eretz Israel, and we force them to either accept the Kadosh Baruch Hu or leave or die, right? So that's what verse Dalet is talking about. And it's a little, we don't think of ourselves as a military power. So for us, we think of ourselves as more spiritual. So it's less uplifting. It's not bad, but it's less uplifting spiritually than a lot of other poems in Tehillim, in Psalms. Yad Biramim Tachtenu. We are, now Yadbir seems to be, gesund, seems to be related to speak, but it means to lead, but it may mean lead through telling people what to do, right? Ordering them around. So we lead other nations, tachtenu, under us, ulu'umim, and many peoples, tachat ragleinu, under our feet. Verse Daled is a very clear reference to military conquest of other nations and peoples. We talked about this once before. There are many different names for ethnicities, for national groupings. Amim are more cohesive. Le'umim are a looser conglomeration of people. So we're both conquering and leading cohesive nations and these looser collections of ethnicities. That's l'umim. The weakest connection between people is goyim. When we use the term goyim for nations or peoples, that means people that have very little in common with each other, perhaps only the coincidence of geography. L'umim means they've got something in common. They may be one government, even though it's many ethnicities. And amim means they're really together and are one grouping and feel a tight. So we are subduing both nations and loose conglomerations of ethnicities. And the result of this military conquest, referred to in verse 4, is Yivchalanu et nachalatenu. That God is choosing for us, is choosing for us nachalatenu, our portion, our special nachala, our special keepsake. I'm sorry? Inheritance. There are two different kinds of inheritances. We sometimes say Yerusha, Morasha, or Nachala. Nachala is more like Morasha. When God forbid, after 120 years, someone passes on, they leave things to their survivors. And so there are two kinds of things that they leave. Some things that they leave are like assets, which the next generation can do with as they please. Some things that they leave are heirlooms. And we want to do everything we can to keep these things and to pass them on to the next generation. That might be like a candelabrum or svarim or something that, that we think, I have a little Kiddush cup from my mother's father. Okay. So that's something, you don't sell. You don't melt it down. You give it to your kids. So that's nachala, is the idea of something that remains in the family or in the nation. So he chose for us, God chose for us our portion, which seems to be the time of Yehoshua, when the Jews came in and each shevet got its nachala. However, but also at Gaon Yaakov, Asher Ahav, and also the Gaon of Yaakov. Now, how do we translate this word Gaon, which is related, by the way, to Ga'ava? I mean, sometimes it's like a negative, can mean haughtiness or arrogance. Okay, God forbid, we don't mean that here. Gaon means pride, glory. I think the term really is more like luminescence, something that shines. We usually translate as pride or glory, the glory of Jacob. Now, when we refer to the Jewish nation as Jacob, just understand that that's more ethnocentric of us, because Jacob is the first of the Avot who had all of his children remain Jewish. So talking about Jacob, Yaakov Avinu, is talking about those of us who are mamash Jewish. Bear that in mind, because we're going to come back to it at the end of the poem. But what is the glory, the pride, the luminescence, okay, the shining glory of Yaakov that he loved? And so this is an argument. Some people say it's Eretz Yisrael. Some say it's a reference to all of Eretz Yisrael. I don't like that one so much. It could be the people, but most people say it's a specific location, because I think Nachalatenu means Eretz Yisrael. Some people say it's Yerushalayim, but my favorite is that people say that it's the Beit HaMikdash. And that would be a reference to Yaakov's dream in Beit El, when he sees the ladder break through to heaven, and the ladder breaks through to heaven over the Beit HaMikdash. In other words, the place where you can interface, or that you can access heaven, is Yerushalayim. So I like that the Gaon, the glory, or the shining pride of Yaakov that he loved is Yerushalayim, because he never let go of the dream that he had in Beit El. And then we end the first part of the poem with the word Selah, which means ta-dam, okay? It was probably at once originally a musical note. It was probably what for us would be like the clashing of cymbals, boom. That's the end of the first point in the poem. So the first point in the poem is everybody is involved in a parade welcoming HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the Jews are leading this parade, and the other people have been subdued by the Jewish nation. And they're going along out of some level of force. Okay? That's the first part of the poem. Everyone's got it? Okay, let's go on to the second part, the next three. Okay, so now, Allah Elokim B'Trua, HaKadosh Baruch Hu rises, ascends, gets even higher. Well, how does Elokim get even higher? By transforming into Yud Kei Vav Kei. So we're talking about Elokim, the God of power and nature and judgment and din. Okay, justice is going higher through our music, through our notes. Hashem, what comes out of the shofar that we blow? Yud Kei Vav Kei. When Elokim ascends, what you get is Yud Kei Vav Kei. And the ascent of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is through our efforts to come into contact with Hashem through Tikiyat Shofar, through the blowing of the shofar. And of course, now we can see why we read this when we blow the shofar. And this is, of course, back to the picture of Nachshon. Because even though we begin with Elokim, the shofrot result in Yud Kei Vav Kei. We find ourselves in the presence of Hashem's rachamim, God's compassion and love and empathy for us. Okay? So it's already a different tone in the second verse. And now it's all about singing. And in other words, this sense of tremendous joy, and I want you to know, a lot of Israeli yeshivot really get this right. I find it personally a little bit difficult. A lot of Israeli yeshivot, and it's funny, even high schools, the davening on Rosh Hashanah is very, very long and very, very loud. There's a lot of singing, and the truth is, it's very, very nice. I find the length a little bit difficult, but a few times I've davened with yeshiva high schools or yeshivas. They're Israeli. It's amazing. The sound level is, and that's verse Zion. Zamru Elokim Zameru. Sing to God, sing. Zamru Lemalkenu Zameru. Sing to our king, our monarch, sing. So it's all about, and that's what Rosh Hashanah should be about. In other words, we've got all of these psukim in Musaf of Rosh Hashanah, and 30 psukim get read. And then there are other parts that are poetic as well. And it's appropriate to sing them. It's appropriate to sing them. That's what's going on. And those psukim are accompanied by the blowing of the shofar. We say 10 psukim of Malchiot, blow the shofar. 10 psukim of Zichronot, remembrances, blow the shofar. 10 psukim of Shofrot, blow the shofar. So it's singing accompanied by music. It must have been amazing in the Beit HaMikdash when the Levium did play instruments on Yontif, that the singing must have been accompanied by orchestral pieces, because we believe the Levium were extremely accomplished musicians and composers. This song was written by Levium. So this is really very, very powerful and telling us that on Rosh Hashanah, we should be coronating Hashem in tremendous joy. And the blowing of the shofar is like trumpet blasts, when the king or queen is being coronated. I mean, it's supposed to really give us this tremendous sense of an amazing tekes, ceremony, coronation going on. And this emphasis, Zamru Elokim Zameru, Zamru Limalkenu Zameru. Why Malkenu? And this used to bother me. It seems sometimes that we're giving a demotion to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. During the year, we say, Baruch Atah Hashem, Hakel HaKadosh, the holy God. And then during the 10 days of repentance, we say, HaMelech HaKadosh, the holy king. I mean, isn't a king lower than a god? Yeah. So why during this time of year when we're supposed to have such awe and reverence for a Kadosh Baruch Hu, why do we sort of seemingly give a Kadosh Baruch Hu a demotion from God to a king? Yeah, why? That's true. He's the King of Kings, but we say specifically the Holy King. We don't say the Holy King of Kings. What's the emphasis? What's the difference often between God and a king? And this was more prevalent to previous generations of people than to us. We don't experience this the same way, but I think we can understand it, even though we don't in our lives have that same cultural reference. The British do. Right. God might give you the impression of being so vastly separated from us that we can't make contact. What we have to feel on Rosh Hashanah and on Yom Kippur is the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's like God's office hours are between, the 1st of Tishrei and the 10th of Tishrei. We've got to feel that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is accessible. We say, Deshu Hashem bihi matza'o. We have to seek out God when God is available, matza'o, when you can find him. pasuk from Isaiah, okay? You have to seek out God when God is available. When is God available? These 10 days. And so since God is available, we're using the term that humanity has used for accessible power, which is the king. Now, we don't have that. We don't feel that same sense of, awesome for a king. But sometimes you read about how the Jews felt about Franz Josef, who was the emperor for like 70 years of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the Jews loved him. They used to call him Papa Franz. And there were Hasidic songs that were written to the Emperor Franz Josef. And the emperor himself liked to visit Jewish communities in Batei Knesset because of the kavod that he got in these Jewish venues. And he would, go on these trips to visit Yehudim, and especially Hasidim would write songs praising and glorifying the emperor, who was, compared to so many other emperors, nice to us. He was a contemporary of Tsar Nicholas, who was such a nasty anti-Semite, and so right across the border we had an emperor that was a Judeophile, and it was really a wonderful thing. And so they understood what it was like on Rosh Hashanah to greet the king. We don't necessarily have the same idea. Even today, it's a machloket. It's a machloket whether or not you can say a bracha on a monarch. There is in the halacha a bracha Hashem, mechaleket kvodo lebasav adam, who has apportioned of his glory to flesh and blood. Okay. If it's a Jewish king, it's liyireyav, to those who are in awe of him. Okay. And there's a famous story from 1964, I'm going to say. Was that the year that Agnon won, the Shai Agnon won, Olav Shalom? 66 won the Nobel Prize, and he really drove them crazy in Sweden to get the prize, because they had to get kosher food, but it was even more than that. They had to check the tuxedo that he had to wear for shatnez. He really drove them crazy, By the way, it's not even clear halachically if you're borrowing a garment. It's possible that it's okay if it has shatnez in, but he drove them crazy. They had to check for shatnez, and they had to get kosher food, and so people said, why are you bothering? Don't go. He said, I've never said the bracha on a king before. And the Nobel Prize is presented, the medal is presented by the King of Sweden. And he said the bracha. He went to say the bracha on a melech, on a king. Now, but there happens to be a machloket, whether or not you can say the bracha on kings today, because the Shulchan Aruch seems to say you can only say the bracha on a ruler who has the power of life and death. And modern kings don't have that. So it's funny. You can say the bracha for Putin, but not for Bibi. It's a funny thing, because, Bibi doesn't have the power of, or Trump, or Queen Elizabeth, because, Western powers, the monarchs and the rulers don't have absolute power over life and death, but Putin does. What's his name? Kim in North Korea does. So it's funny that these evil people, you can say the bracha on them, the lishum safek, but it's a safek whether or not you can say the bracha on Queen Elizabeth. The truth is, I think I would be makil and say the bracha if I ever saw Queen Elizabeth. I think, I don't know. No, that's a prayer. We're saying the bracha, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, hamechalek et kvodo lebasav adam. But they definitely said the bracha for Franz Josef, and people wanted to say the bracha because they really had this kavod and love for Papa Yosef. It's interesting. Please.
Say it on a friendly benevolent king?
No. It's weird, but you'd want to only say it. But if you happen to encounter one of these nasty sons of a gun, then you say the bracha too. It's because of the power, not because of your affection. In the case of Franz Josef, there was real affection. But in these other cases, somebody has the power, then you say the bracha, with trepidation, but you say the bracha. Yeah, interesting. No, emotionally, I agree with you, but halachically, it's on the power. Okay, so again, back to the poem. So, Zamru Elokim Zameru Zamru L'Malkeinu, our king to whom we relate, Zamru sing, Ki Melech Kol Ha'aretz, because God is the king of the entire universe, and that's Elokim. And then Zamru Maskil. Sing Maskil. Now, it's a big machloket what Maskil means. I don't like what is the most popular pshat. Most of the historical authorities and they say that Maskil, like Sela, was a musical note. A very distinctive, special musical note. I happen not to like that pshat, even though that may be the correct interpretation. But sometimes we go for emotion over literalism, because I'd like to think it means sing anyone who is a maskil. Who is a maskil? Now I'm not talking about the maskilim from the 18th and 19th centuries, those bad guys. I'm not talking about them, those people that were, they weren't all bad guys. I have to be careful. Some of them were sincere, but some of them were trying to break down Judaism. Some of them really were nasty. But they were trouble for Torah Judaism. But what's the word really mean? Maskil means a person with seichel. Sing those few of you, that's why it's in the singular, those few of you who truly understand, those people who really get it. That's what a maskil is. A maskil in its original meaning, before it became a term for a movement, in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, or throughout the 19th century. Before that, it was a noun that described people who get it, people with seichel, with sense. And logical foresight. It's until 200 years ago, it was a big compliment to be called a maskil. Even in firm circles, right? It was, you really get it, and that's what I think it means here. And that's the end of the second part of the poem. Second part of the poem is really about rejoicing and singing and making music and blowing shofar, and all of this hoopla has an effect on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It affects our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is transformed from a transcendent God to an immanent king. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu becomes the benevolent Yud Kei Vav Kei, rather than the judgmental Elokim. So that's what's going on in those three verses. The end of the poem, to me, must be talking about Yemot HaMashiach. Even though there's a machloket back in the first part of the poem, whether that's talking about the Zman of Yehoshua and the conquest of the nations and made Eretz Yisrael our Nachala, that's a machloket. Was it talking about Yeshua or was it talking about Yemot HaMashiach? For me, the end of the poem is Vadai, talking about Yemot HaMashiach. And let's take a look. The last two verses. Malach Elokim al Goyim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has been already ruling over all of the nations. And by nations, Goyim means all of the conglomeration of humanity. Remember, Goyim is that loosest expression for a collection of ethnicities that just happen. In this case, they just happen to be on planet Earth because we're talking about all of them, right? Elokim Yashav al Kisei Kacham. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is enthroned on his holy, his celestial throne. No, malach here is the past tense of continuation. I forget the Latin term for that. Yeah. Was and continues to sit. It's a past tense that denotes continuity. There's an expression for what kind of past tense that is. I can't remember what it is. I'm sorry. Yeah, it is. Yeah. But it means a continuing act in the past that continues. Now we get to Yud, which is the last pasuk, but I think very, very critical. Nedivei amim ne'esafu. All of the nedivei amim. What's a nediv? I'm sorry? It gives money. Yeah, that's true. Nadiv can mean, obviously can mean a philanthropist. Nadiv was the nickname for Rothschild. And if you visit, it's worth going there. Up in Zichron, if you go to his kever, it's a beautiful park with a view of the Mediterranean, but Ramat HaNadiv. It's called the Heights of the Philanthropist. Rothschild forbade anybody from telling people that he was the source of the money that was supporting, especially the vineyards and a lot of communities, right? So they came up with a nickname, but before very long, everybody knew that who they meant when they said, the philanthropist, the Nadiv. But it really means someone with royal, noble traits. And yes, it does mean someone who's generous. It does mean someone who is philanthropic, but it really means someone with noble traits. So all of those people of all of the nations that have these traits of nobility, ne'esafu, they're gathering. They're coming together. It's not like the first part of the poem. In the first part of the poem, how did the Gentiles feel about us? Not so good, because we had forced ourselves upon them. We had conquered them. But here, Nesafu, they're gathering of their own free will. They're people who are coming together with us because they have the nobility of spirit to get it. Elokei Avraham. We're no longer referring to a Kadosh Baruch Hu as the God of Yaakov. We're talking about a Kadosh Baruch Hu as the God of Avraham. What's the difference? When we say Yaakov, what are we referring to? The God of just the Jews. The term Yaakov is much more ethnocentric. When we talk about Avraham, who was the one who went out, va'asa nefashot, he converted people. He made them into neshamot. He uplifted them spiritually, transformed them into people that understood about a Kadosh Baruch Hu. That's the people we're talking about at the end. These people in the end of the poem aren't coming because of any coercion whatsoever. They're coming to join us in Yerushalayim over the coronation of a Kadosh Baruch Hu because they understand and they get it and they want to be part of it. Do they actually convert to Judaism or not? That's a tremendous machloket in the verses in the end of Zechariah. Whether they will be Chasidei Umot Olam, remain Gentiles, or actually become Jews. I mean, you have to look at the Psukim in Yeshayahu and Zechariah that talk about it. It's a machloket. We're not sure. Yeshayahu makes it sound more like they convert, and Zechariah makes it more sound like they remain their separate, ethnicities. That's a detail that's unimportant right now, but they're going to come and join us in this love fest, if you will, with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's extremely moving and important, and that's why I say these psukim must be talking about Yemot HaMashiach, as opposed to the earlier psukim, which are perhaps referencing the time of Yehoshua. Ki lelokim magine eretz, because to God are all of those who protect, I was putting the two words, perfect and defend, I was putting the two words together, protect and defend the land. Who are the people that protect and defend the land? Sorry about that, okay? Who are those people that, at the beginning of the verse, we talk of people of noble spirit. Megine aretz are people who don't necessarily have that noble spirit. These are people that do what? These are people who are powerful. They may be military people. They may be captains of industry. These are people who are more pragmatic and practical and do the things that are necessary to make the earth a livable place. That's Magine Eretz. So the first one are the champions of the soul. Those Nidivim at the beginning of this pasuk. The end of the pasuk, Magine, those are the people who are objectively powerful in terms of their skills or positions and all the things that they can do. And whether it's out of the spirit or whether it's out of the skill and power, it's all dedicated to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They all get Hashem. Now, what's interesting is at the end of the poem, we don't have any reference to Yud Kei Vav Kei. The end of the poem is only Elokim. And it seems like the appellation Yud Kei Vav Kei is unique to the Jewish people. Not that the Gentiles can't have a wonderful relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, and not that they can't get it or be spiritual and be involved, but they don't quite get to Yud Kei Vav Kei. The Yud Kei Vav Kei relationship seems to be, according to our poet, the Levium that wrote the poem, seemed to be unique to Klal Yisrael. And I mean, that's important and beautiful for us to understand. And this is the idea that everyone's going to join, but not everyone's going to necessarily, be equal at this particular, festival and celebration and whatever. This goes back to a message. I'm almost done with the poem. Okay. We'll do the last two words in a second, but this goes back to the concept of Sukkot and Shmini Atzeret. Because we're not going to get a chance to really talk about Sukkot and Shmini Atzeret because there'll be no Sundays in there. So there are a couple of beautiful poems that talk about Sukkot that we're not going to be able to do. But I just to get in the idea here, Sukkot, and on the first day of Sukkot, we read the Psukim of Zechariah about all of the Goyim coming to Yerushalayim and joining in. And of course, on Sukkot, we sacrifice the 70 oxen, which represent the 70 nations of the world, and it's a nature holiday, a harvest festival. It's the most universal of our holidays. Remember, Pesach is primarily about Yetziat Mitzrayim, and Shavuot is primarily about Matan Torah, receiving the Torah at Sinai. But Sukkot, even though there is a reference to the time in the desert, is primarily an agricultural harvest festival. And everybody can do that. And everybody does do that. I mean, the concept of harvest is universal. And that's Elokim. And that's everybody. And extremely, ecumenical, if you will. By the way, that's why it's on Sukkot that this universal or this Universal Conference of Christianity. They come to Yerushalayim. They have that big parade, and tens of thousands of Christians march. And it's Davka on Sukkot, because they recognize the psukim from Zechariah, which we read, and and I tell you, the first year I made Aliyah, in 1973, I want you to know, I stood on the sidewalk and I cried. It was just so moving to see, all these Christians telling us, how much they loved us. And we had, at that time I had two little girls, and there were people coming over and giving them candy and giving them flags from the nations, and it was just, it was just so emotionally moving. Now I just complain about the fact that they ruin our traffic patterns. Okay, after a while it loses its charm. I feel so guilty. Now just, oh my God, I can't go downtown because all those Christians are taking up the streets. No. I know I agree with you, but it's like, yeah, we sadly we lose the initial. But you can never repeat. By the way, that first year, I had no idea it was going to happen. I was living in Gush Etzion. We took a bus to Yerushalayim just to visit and go out to a restaurant, and then all of a sudden, this parade started. I had no idea it was going to, and I just wow, it was just took my heart away. And now the poem ends. Ma'od na'aleh. Very much we have ascension. Now, not ascension like the Goyim use the expression. When you look at Har HaZeitim, Lahavdil, and there's a very tall church with a steeple. Their idea of ascension has to do with Oto Aish, right? Okay, our idea of ascension is that God, as great as God is, God can go even higher. And how can God go even higher? And this is a midrash that probably all of you know from the end of the first parak of Breshit. What does the word ma'od really mean? That doesn't mean paya lamod. What does ma'od really mean? Adam. When it says V'yar Elokim ki tov ma'od, the Midrash says, and Rashi quotes, ma'od is Adam, is humanity. The ascent of God is partially dependent upon us. And it's not just Yehudim. At the end of the poem, all of humanity can have a part. All of humanity can partner in this raising HaKadosh Baruch Hu to higher levels of glory. And these are the things we're supposed to think about when we blow the shofar. And especially when we read the psukim of shofarot. Those psukim are specifically to inspire us over how blowing the shofar is not only reminiscent of what happened at Har Sinai when the shofar was blown, but Takab shofar gadol, there's a greater shofar that's going to be blown when Mashiach comes. And that's ma'od na'allah. That it's like you ain't seen nothing yet, right? It's a greater shofar that will be blown when Mashiach comes. And that's the ma'od na'aleh at the end of the poem. No matter how high you get on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, there's still more. I'm sorry to make you wait.
I'm sorry, I just want to say it's a beautiful, the whole explanation is second.
Oh, thank you.
The reason that people pay attention, because I'm going, you count, they try to get 7 before they start blowing. Not everybody reads so quickly they can get in the 7th time.
Right.
Before
So there's.
And so you don't pay attention.
Right. You feel the rush. Yeah, you feel the rush, and I would say, I would say read it as many times as you can read it with meaning.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah. No, don't get the 7. You don't get the 7. It's, someone in the show made it to 7. I want you to know, when I used to blow shofar back in the States, I would read it the 6 times relatively quickly. The 7th time, I would read it word for word. And what was nice was eventually, because I was blowing in the same place, for 16 consecutive years, people were reading it with me. At last time, we're reading it word for word. Yeah, and that was the 7th one was the one that was really, yeah. So, as we end, because I'm running out of time, Ketiva uchatima tova. Everybody should have a happy, healthy New Year and an extremely uplifting Rosh Hashanah. 2 weeks from today, we're going to do Perek Lamed Bet, which is the Shir Shal Yom for Yom Kippur. It's an amazing, amazing poem. Okay? Call 2 of everybody.